Welcome back. In this panel, we want to explore the topic of empowerment. And we've brought with us two brilliant guests, I would say, Malcolm and Leila, to explore this topic. I think let's start off with understanding who you are and what you do and how you sort of relate to this topic. We can start here, Leila.
Thank you for inviting me. I've been working in employment services for many years, and I also have a podcast called Jobb, alla, which is around the topic of how to create work for more people.
Oh yes, direct translation, work for everyone.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm very, I'm a nerd when it comes to personal development. I've always been centered around the topic of why do we do the things that we do? I've always been interested to know that and understand that, especially when it comes to myself, in seeing how I grew up as an immigrant child to immigrant parents in a Swedish context. I want to know why are people like the way that they are, and how can I find a sense of self in this context. So it's always been a personal interest of me. Mine.
I'm very interested in hearing some of that in this conversation as well.
Yeah, I hope so.
How about you, Malcolm?
Yeah, well, I'm a personal development nerd as well. Hence the name of my company, Brave Personal Development.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm a founder of Brave Personal Development, a company I started to coach and empower people. I'm also leadership and culture consultant at Hammer and Hanbury, prestigious consultancy that's helped creating the future of work. And I've spent the last 25 years understanding how to empower people through language, and how we can also really empower people by helping them understand what they're actually good at. Because I think that, quite often, and I'm jumping into the topic now, is that, quite often people say, well, I'm an accountant, but that doesn't tell you actually what they're good at. Or I'm a IT developer, but what are you actually good at? And so for me, empowerment, one of the first places empowerment starts is with language. And I really am extremely passionate about language, NLP master practitioner. And for 25 years, I've studied how can we use language to empower people and direct attention. So it's really a passion of mine.
I'm thinking, let's start off this conversation with clearing out some misconceptions around empowerment.
Great.
So what would you say are some misconceptions around empowerment?
Yeah, so I think, when it comes to common misconceptions, one of the things that I see working with organizations, because as a leadership and culture consultant, I'm inside companies large and small all the time. And they keep calling me to get their people engaged. Can you engage our people? And one of the things I reply back is, could we empower them instead? Because it's actually empowerment that creates engagement. It's like, do I know what I'm supposed to do? Am I empowered to do it? And do I have the sort of space around me to do the job in the way that I would be able to do it best? And so for me, one of the misconceptions around empowerment is actually that thing of engagement versus empowerment, because I think companies are mixing this up all the time. Because they're asking me, could you give us the icing? And it's like, what about the cake?
Sprinkle in some engagement.
Yeah. Like, what about the cake? But I think as well, we need to really think about this we can think about this topic on many levels. So one of the things that I think about is, inside companies, do people know their place, like in the structure, and feel like they understand it enough that they can take action? But I think as well, and this is something I think will cross over into the area that you speak about, is around identity. That people have a strong sense of self-identity and are able to know it for themselves, but also convey it to other people. Because that creates belonging, that creates space. And so for me, like that is one of the really critical things that you can give someone empowerment. I think you can create structures for that to happen, but the individual also has to bring a lot to the table.
Bring themselves
into
it.
And I feel like right now we're going through a phase of company cultures where it's like, you do it for me. Like, I want you to show me. And I feel like there's a generation of people coming into work where they want the workplace to prove that it's a place that will give them identity, but it's a two-way street. You have to meet in the middle. The individual must bring a strong sense of self-worth and empowerment to the table so the company can know what to do with it in the best possible way.
That's brilliant. And does it bring seeing organizations more like a collection of individuals as well, not an entity in itself only, but a collection of these identities and how we bring it to work and collaborate?
Well, I think it's going to become more and more important, because what happened during the pandemic is we kind of disintegrated the workplace as a concept, right? Going to work now is anything. It's staying home, it's going to a cafe, it's working from Amsterdam. It's, work now is just not a place. It's an activity. And one of the things that I see is absolutely critical right now as we move from remote working to hybrid working is people are going to be less tethered to the organization in terms of actually physically being in it, which means they need to have a very strong self-identity and self-worth and be empowered so that they can operate in lots of dynamic environments that are probably fast changing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And they're not going to be given, like that whole thing of working your way up a company ladder to get the corner office and the pot plant. That's gone, baby. That's disappeared. Now it's going to be a whole different journey.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've always thought about, reflected on this subject when it comes to empowerment, because I myself have been forced to find my place in the context of the world that I'm living in, or the society I'm living in. So I know, I recognize all the things that you described. So what I see in people who are unemployed, for example, who are trying to enter the job market, is the lack of self-awareness, that they don't know who they are and they don't know what to provide to the table. If I compare, for example, in the 60s when my parents came to Sweden, it was just you go into a place and say, I like to work, and they give you a broom or a napkin or something, and you start to work. That's it. But here you have to talk about what is your value to us. Why would we hire you instead of all the hundreds of other people who want to work with us? And that is the problem that they have. They don't know what they bring to the table. They don't know their sense of value or self-awareness, what is unique with me, so to speak. So, and that is what you need to start to work with. You need to start to create this self-awareness. Who am I? What do I bring to the table? And what do I want from this workplace?
Because you haven't had the understanding or been taught that it's important actually who you are.
Yeah, exactly.
And this, I am visualizing sort of a shift from you as a tool, maybe more industrial age related, to you as an individual contributing in an information age with your perspective and bringing that to work.
Yeah, and I think most of you in Aline and the work that you do, the companies that you meet, then the people that you hire, they have to have a sense of self. But in the line of work that I work, in employment services, then it's more the more simple work. You work as a truck driver, or you work as with cleaning or something more simple, and they have a trouble understanding, why do I have to market myself? Who I am? I just want to do the job. That's all. But even then, you have hundreds of people applying for the same job. You still need to market yourself. What makes you unique?
I see a great opportunity for us here to explore this starting from an individual perspective. So how can I practically increase my sense of empowerment, and then going into organizations as well and finding an alignment there. So starting from the individual perspective, what is sort of key advice that both of you share in your work?
Well, I always start with yourself. Who are you? If I meet someone who's unemployed, I always start by asking I need to know who you are. Sort
of your history?
Yeah, the history and what makes you tick. What do you like? What do you enjoy? What makes you lose sense of time, for example? Start there. Even if it's far distant from the line of work that you're applying for, you still need to find something that makes you engaged and focus on that.
Sort of, what do you tend to do when no one's watching or when you're not forced to do anything, and find keys from there?
Yeah, I have the opportunity working as a coach to work with a lot of people who are transitioning in their career. And, I think that, one of the things that we talk about unemployment, but there's also this bridge people have to cross now, often in different parts of their life where they need to move from one career to another. So, you might be in a career that's getting disrupted by technology and you've got to move somewhere else. And how can you bring the skills and talents that you had in one area across that bridge into another? And so one of the things I do as a coach, and I help people to really get in touch with the things they're good with, they're good at. So you might be an amazing team builder. You might be really analytical. I might be really good motivator. But what happens is if you can bring a specific set of talents and skills to any role, you become more attractive. So for instance, if I'm going for a job interview with you and it's a job that is going to be a product developer, say, the job is product development, but let me tell you how I'm going to do it because these are my skills and talents. So when I come into your organization and then I can have a whole pitch to you and I have a structure to teach people to do this, I can actually compellingly tell you how I'm going to do that role. And as soon as you do that, you move your opportunity potential so far up the ladder, because most people who come in, one of the questions that get asked all the time at job interviews is, tell me about yourself, right? And I go to schools like Hyper Island and I say, tell me about yourself. And everyone goes, right? They freak out. It's like the worst question in the world. Yeah. But if you can say, well, actually, I'm an analytical motivator. So what do I mean by that? And then you can have a little pitch. How much more confident would you be? But almost how much more value are you offering an organization or a potential employer? And what's really interesting, and I love to do this, is helping someone, who has come to Sweden to really show their value to an organization because of where they came from.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So
and this makes me so happy. So, I'll say, coach someone from Syria, for example. It's like, well, I survived the war. Or, I was a refugee and now I'm established in Sweden and I have a job and I want a better job. How impressive is that? So quite often people want to suppress that. And I'm saying, no, that's a superpower. Let's bring that onto the table and use that as a way to make you even more attractive to the marketplace.
I love this. So it's like you already have it. Instead of searching from outside, what can I do to become better? What am I actually good at? Understanding that in the first case. And then as well, I love the part of translating that or transferring that into a new field, because I'm guessing many times when you go into an interview, you're just thinking about how can I pitch and how can I get this job, but starting from the other end. Who am I and what do I have?
Yeah.
And how is this relevant?
And what's your superpower? Because usually it's not your degree, right? You might be a doctor, but your superpower might be empathy.
Hundreds
so
might have that degree.
Yeah.
What makes you?
But what is it about you that makes you really be able to function at a high level in your job? And I believe that everybody can do two or three things really, really well. And that's how they do every job. So if I look at your work history and we go through, we'll probably see the same patterns of behavior that made you successful in each one. Just keep repeating. So the more you can know that, the better.
But also to move away from this, for example, in Sweden, when you go to networking events and you start by asking, okay, what do you do? And you say, I am an attorney or I am a coder, for example. Instead of saying that, you say, I enjoy helping people to thrive in their business, for example. That is what you do. You are not a coder. I mean, that's not what you were born to do.
Absolutely.
What you were born to do is to help people thrive, for example.
And how empowering is that narrative, right? Yes. Because then we're connecting skills to identity, to outcomes. And this is like, the cycle, what I call the cycle of self-empowerment, is that, and I had just such a lovely message on LinkedIn on Monday. A lady said to me, you taught me like a year ago how to pitch yourself in a job interview. And I went for a job interview the other day and I landed my dream job using this technique, But for me, this is the cycle of self-empowerment, because once you can put into language what your skills, talents, wisdom, and knowledge is in a really concise way, in a way that feels comfortable to you, and you practice it and get used to giving it away, you become a magnet for opportunity.
Yeah, you can even see it on LinkedIn now. More and more people, they don't have their job title in the title section. I've actually seen that. They have what they actually do.
Yes. Yep, Chief Wisdom Officer or Unicorn Wrangler, or whatever it is.
Making the world better through sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then going to the organizational perspective, we have touched upon it. This was very concrete, by the way, tangible advice for an individual. And then for an organization, how can we increase the, let's say, opportunities for an individual to feel more empowered? How do we design organizations better?
Yes. From my experience is that you need to, managers, for example, they need to have more, in Swedish we call it tillitsbaserat ledarskap, which means trust leadership, basically, that you trust that the people that you are in charge of, that they can do the job, and that you trust them, and you coach them more than you manage them, basically, because then you feel more empowered, and you feel a sense of, okay, my manager believes in me, and trusts me to do a good job.
I like that. In the startup world, there is the term that doing what you're told is a fireable offense.
Right.
So you're meant to challenge and create and actually have the trust to do things differently than what you're told.
Yeah. And what's great about what you just said is the new way of working post-pandemic. Like, there's no leader cannot be that kind of leader anymore because their team is no longer going to be in front of them all the time. For, in terms of knowledge workers, they're going to be distributed, in a hybrid way. And I think it's just going to be this ongoing effect of people moving out of the mothership and only using the mothership, as my friend Kristen calls it, just to come in and collaborate, meet, socialize, get connection, have that feedback time, the coaching that you mentioned earlier. But the actual work can happen anywhere. And so we're going to develop, leaders are going to have to become this, very trusting, very trust-based leaders. It's not going to be about that anymore.
But it's also a fine line there, because some leaders, they take it too far, and that they release all control whatsoever from their teams. And you still need to have be in touch with the people that you are in charge of, and you have to always show that you care about them and ask them how's it going, is there anything I can do for you. So you keep this contact with them. Otherwise, you lose touch, and they feel a sense of nobody cares what I do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The way I have differentiated that is leading with context rather than control. Because it's also a very weak sense of control. Okay, I know that you checked in at this time, you were physically in the building, and you left at the right time. But that's really, it doesn't give you any control, or it doesn't tie to the output, basically. But by leading with context, okay, so this is what we're doing together as a team, and what can you bring to this? And actually having the individuals trying to understand the context deeper, and we're more of a partnership. So rather than this is an entity, this is what we're doing, we're a group of individuals with unique perspectives, and how can we, in this context of what we're trying to create, perform our best. And so looking at an individual, let's say, who's outside of a job right now, what are some triggers to look for when looking for a job, to try to identify if an organization is empowering or not?
Well, me personally, I always look at I do research, for example, look at what kind of message or communication style or strategy they have on their website, on their LinkedIn profile, or what kind of people are working there. For example, me, if I'm looking for a company that I would like to work with, I look at what kind of people are working there to see if are there people that I can see myself work with or not. What do they communicate out on their webpage and LinkedIn profiles and so on, to see if that's something that I can connect with personality-wise, and see if that's something I can contribute to.
So
also
taking the pulse of the company.
That's what I do.
Or I mean, I can only speak from experience on this one, because the first thing is I always tell people who come to me for help with, to get coaching from me to help get into the workforce, or is disrupt the process of job applications. Like, sending in job applications is, basically putting yourself into a pool of hundreds of candidates. But can you do one or two different things, empowering things that would actually make you stand outside the pack? So, one of the things I encourage people to do is to reach out to companies with a handwritten card saying, I'd love to invite you for a fika and learn more about your organization to see if we'd be a good fit for each other. I remember when I first moved to Sweden, I only knew my wife and her parents. I knew 3 people. I didn't know anybody, zero network. And, my whole approach there was just, I realized after, 20 job applications and zero response of any kind that this is a waste of time. So how can I go around the system, contact people, pick up the phone or send them a handwritten card, follow that up with a phone, and actually kind of differentiate yourself in the marketplace, but also kind of take that position, the empowered position of, I want to check you out to see if I think you're good enough to apply for. And so then the power dynamic of the whole job search just changes, right? And I remember when I came here, I'll just share a personal story, was, I had a job, got a first job in Sweden, and I wanted to take a step up after, 6 to 8 months, I can't remember. And I called up this sales manager and said, I'm really interested in your organization and the job you've got advertised. Are you available for a lunch? Could I take you for a lunch to learn more about your organization, how I might fit into it? And he said, yeah, that's fine. Took this guy out to lunch and had a fantastic lunch. And at the end of it, I pulled out a CV and said, based on our conversation, would you be willing to put this on the HR manager's desk and recommend me for an interview? And he said 100%. Right, 2 days later, had an interview. 2 days after that, had a second interview and got the job. So I think there's a proactivity there where you can empower yourself to not be kind of just playing a lottery with algorithms of, CVs but actually putting yourself out there and letting people see, because if you look at a CV, how much could you tell about me from a CV? I mean, you know me, I'm loud and weird and do 100 things, but how could I put that on a CV? How would my energy or talents or wisdom and experience possibly fit on a piece of A4 paper?
I have another tip in line with that tip, contacting someone for a fika or lunch. That is also, for example, if you want to transition from one industry to another and you don't know so much about the industry, you can contact someone on LinkedIn and ask them for what we call a backwards interview, which means that you want to get to know the industry through someone. You don't contact them necessarily to have a job opportunity. You just want to learn about the industry. And that way you can empower yourself more to know about the industry that you want to enter, so that when you do applications to different companies, you already know what you're talking about and you know what they're looking for. And from this person, you can also get maybe recommendations. This and this kind of company would be interested in someone like you.
And that would be a much more informed application as well.
Yeah, exactly.
With having the knowledge about the field.
Yeah.
Can we just jump for a second to job interviews?
Yes.
Would that be all right?
Yeah, sure, yes.
It's your show. But
Go ahead.
But one thing that I just tell another quick story is that my wife entered the workforce, a few years ago after basically having a whole career as an opera singer. And then she went to university, got a degree, and then she had to have the first job interviews of her life, basically, because she used to do auditions. And she said, I don't know how to do a job interview. And I said, well, let's just Google the top 50 questions asked at job interviews. And there's lists of them online. And I said, let's just write a compelling answer for each one of these. And then when she went to a job interview, she went to her first job interview, came and said, every question they asked was on the list. Right? Because most of the people interviewing are probably getting the questions off Google.
It's the process, exactly.
Right?
Yes.
And it's a ritual, right?
Yes.
A job interview is a ritual. So you can predict it. It's not going to be, I don't know, unicorn writing or something strange happening. It's like, where are you from? What's your experience? What would you contribute to the company? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Are you a team player? They ask all these questions, right? So you can actually go through and prepare for all of the questions that you expect them to ask.
Can I ask a question there? In her preparation, I'm leading towards an answer, but is she preparing to say what they want to hear, or is she genuinely preparing what is her answer to these questions?
I think we did a little bit of marketing there. I helped her with that. But I think that the main point was that you can be very empowered when you go into a job interview. If you know what your skills and talents are, if you've practiced all the questions, if someone asks you what kind of person are you, and you say it, at the end of saying it, ask the person that's interviewing you, what kind of person are you?
Oh, yeah.
Put the question back across the table. Yeah.
And the reason I asked my question was because I feel like many times when people go into interviews, they're so focused on saying the right thing or saying what the person wants to hear, but rather go in, be empowered, tell them, speak your truth, so to say, share who you are. And if there's a match, there's a match. If there isn't, it's not. It's not.
And if I recall correctly, my wife did like 4 job interviews and got 4 offers.
Yeah.
And then, this is empowered, she went to the clinic she really wanted, because she's a hearing specialist, she went to the clinic she really wanted a job at and said, I've got 4 offers, but I'd rather work for you. And they created a job for her.
Yeah, because you don't want to seem desperate in your job application phase. You need to diverse yourself as much as you can and not get too attached to one specific job, and make sure that you are in a position of empowerment in that situation.
And find the leverage in just being you, sort of.
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation, very inspirational, both with the stories you shared and very insightful, sharing your knowledge as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next, we will be moving into another panel where I will actually be a participant in that panel. Stay tuned.